Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Noelle Figueroa, also known as the Anointed Pen, and this is episode number 8 of season 3 of the P.W.P Sessions podcast. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Tonight's guest is an awesome poet in his own right by the name of Paul Richmond, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with him. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with this podcast, the P.W.P Sessions or the Poets for Purpose Sessions podcast is a podcast that I created where I interview new or established authors of poetry, rappers, or MCs. I feature a performance of their work along with an audience Q&A session. I'm your host, Noelle Figueroa. I am a poet, author, blogger, workshop facilitator, and event host, and I am the creator of the P.W.P Sessions. Tonight's guest is Paul Richmond, and this is his bio. Paul Richmond was awarded Beat Poet Laureate 3 times, Massachusetts, National, and Lifetime. He is best described as political, deadpan, and wryly humorous, delivered in his own style. He has been called Assassin of Apathy, Power of Words, Humor, on the unthinkable, the unsolvable, to analyze, to digest, to give birth, to creativity and hope. He has performed nationally and internationally. He created the project Do It Now. He is also a publisher of over 60 writers and has 7 books himself. For more information about Paul and his work, you can go to www.humanerrorpublishing.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is Paul Richmond. Hey, Paul, good evening. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, and thanks for having me here, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for being my guest. I'm excited to have this conversation. Now, who is Paul Richmond? How would you describe yourself or define yourself?
Well, I've been trying to figure out who Paul Richmond is for a long time. And I'm still figuring it out. Let me say that. Paul Richmond at the moment is an old guy. I'm trying to actually take that in. You know, life goes by pretty fast. I just turned into my 70s, which is amazing to me. So Paul Richmond is someone who just keeps trying. I was a real quick in terms of my history. I was not a great student. I didn't learn phonics. I got kind of messed up by a project in the schools of sight reading. So I did not know how to pronounce things. They finally came back and gave a little phonics, but my ear of hearing when someone would say, say f or something for some other language, when I go to say it, they look at me like I didn't hear them. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, no, what are you doing? I asked you to say this, and then I'll try it. And I think I'm saying that, but I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I was reading at a 4th grade level in 7th grade. Who knows how I got to the 7th grade, but that's what was happening. But I got inspired by, it's funny that I was then nominated years later as a beat poet, but I got inspired by many of the beats in the early 60s and by various rock and roll band singers who had more lyrics. They felt like letters to me into my house compared to what was going on. And I started to keep journals, and I wrote a lot, but I started to realize I didn't know how to spell. I had a hard time trusting what I wanted to say. I would get, caught up in it if I spelled it right or I couldn't write. And next thing you know, I would stop. And after a while, I came up with a way of not doing that. I just marked the word to come back and just kept going so I wouldn't lose the thought. So I just wanted to say that in relation to then many years later, after a whole bunch of other things that I did that was around arts and creativity, I took my writing more seriously. And then that's how I've become having 7 books and running festivals and publishing other authors.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. What was that defining moment when you discovered that, poetry was your thing to pursue? What was that moment? At what point in time did you decide that poetry was something that you wanted to pursue on a regular basis?
I don't know that I actually defined it just as poetry. It's interesting, when I first did my first festival, I called it a poetry festival, but then I changed it to word because more people kept saying they hated poetry. But then they would come to my events and they would say, well, was that a poem? And I'd say, well, no, did you like it? And yeah, okay. So then it wasn't the poetry they had done in high school or however they got turned off. I kind of just got turned on to, even when I was doing my journals or reading some of the stuff in the early 50s and 60s of the various writers, and realizing people were talking about what was going on, or they were relating to something that I related to, or that they were giving me permission to say what I'm thinking and feeling is okay to say, or that it needs to be said, that maybe some other people will think the same thing, or maybe don't have answers for it, but it needs to be at least spoken. So that was always there with me. And through my other art, I was a professional juggler for 20 years. So I did a lot of, to survive that way, I had to, my tricks didn't change, my verbiage changed
Right.
depending on where I was. So I would have different things I would say for the same trick, depending on who was paying me. But so I always knew that words and messages mattered. And so I would say, just to not go too long in that question, so there wasn't really any defining moment. It was more about that words mattered. And
Right.
so when I took myself seriously, realizing I was having these stories, or I was thinking about these incidences, or I was observing something, and I thought, that capsulizes an experience that many people have. How can I capture that?
Right.
And so that's really, I wouldn't be able to pin it down to one, but that was the overall.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. What were the first subjects that you started tackling? Like, what were topics that caught your attention that you wanted to talk about when you first started writing?
Early on in the 70s, I had a couple of things published, but back then I was young, so sexuality,
Mhm.
had a hold. Why relationships? Why am I in one? Why am I not in one? What's going on in them?
Right.
Also, just the dynamics, because I grew up when women's studies and all these things of the 60s, anti-war movement, a lot of issues were being brought up.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of questioning about male and female relationships, about identities, all of that. So my first, and political stuff. So my writing took on all of that, of trying to, and where I was in that. One of my biggest writing experiences, actually, I will say, is I was 1A. I was supposed to get drafted. I fought against the Vietnam War for 2 years. And in that 2.5 years, and in that process, I was with some folks who were having me write up my beliefs for, in the end, if the various things I was working on to fight to not go in, whether or not I would try to be a CO. And one of those experiences was them asking me what I believed in. And they didn't have any judgments. I would write, bring it to them, and they would just read it out loud. And I could have said, I believe in green frogs, and they develop, and the princess kisses them, and they become great men, and blah, blah, blah. And they would just read it. They wouldn't laugh or say that's absurd or anything. And they asked me, is that what you believe? And I realized early on that what I was writing were just stories that had been told to me. And so it was a real search of, well, what do I actually believe in? Is it a force? Do I believe in a God? Why should I not kill? So that process of trying to rewrite that and write that and write that over those 2 years really brought a lot of questioning up about myself.
Wow, excellent. And who or what would you say helped you to develop your skills as a writer?
I think many people. I think one is, each individual has to be open to hearing people say what they think about your work, for you to grow from it. I think, again, just meeting and going out and seeing people that I would listen to and say, wow, that was, amazing what they just put together, or, those thoughts or whatever was happening. I did something when I first had, before I was getting my first book rejected and stuff, and I decided I was going to go to festivals where people didn't know me and read my stuff and see, so that I wasn't thinking my friends were just being nice and saying good work and all of that. And so I did that. And one of them was in Austin at the International Festival. And after getting off a couple of stages, people came up to me and said, do you have do you have books? I'd like to buy your book. And it made me realize, okay, I do have something. That was a little encouragement to say, keep trusting that I wanted to write something, and people thought what I was saying was important to them too. But it has to come from you. I mean, whether it's important to anybody or not, I think as a writer, you have a passion, you have things that are coming up in you, and that's your creative outlook. Some people dance it out, some people paint it out.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and I'm sure it's quite an energetic feeling when people make note of your work to the point where they want to see a book from you, something tangible that they could take with them, to go back to, over and over again, because they found enjoyment and pleasure in it. And with that being said, can you describe what your journey was like to putting together your very first book?
Well, that, as I just stated a little bit, part of that was that, I mean, I was, writing, and I had enough stuff for a book, and I saw that there was some ways that, you tried to find a publisher, or you sent it out. I did a little bit of that. But because of my career as a performer and as an artist, I had computer skills because I had to create my own websites. I had to create my own promo to send out to get those jobs. So I was used to being on the computer, and I was kind of keeping up to date with various changes in the computer world. And that's when early on Creative Space and Lulu and some folks came out and said print on demand was available and that you could publish. And I found out that you could buy an ISB number. And through my experiences of being a self-employed and being an artist where I had to promote myself as a juggler, writers don't usually think of promoting themselves.
Right.
They're in their rooms writing, and somehow they think somebody finds their work and knocks on the door and says, "Oh, no, we were looking for you and we were hoping to publish your book." It doesn't quite happen like that unless you're Michelle Obama or somebody that people
Right.
really know. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so I've met many writers who don't think about, I have to make it happen. Just like with my festivals, when I came back to my area, there wasn't many things going on. And I just said, why not? We have coffee shops, we have places where nobody was just organizing it. Now there's tons of places, so. But I saw that. Since I got asked, like I said, from the stages, I bought some ISB numbers. I could figure out how to do the self-publishing. And I did the first book, made a lot of mistakes, and learned a bunch from it, and had to revise it and did some stuff. But then all of a sudden I had a book to read. And it's funny in our culture what stamp you need, whether it's an MFA or some award because you were at some event, or you're holding a book in your hand.
Right.
I mean, it suddenly becomes a different, whether that's good or bad, actually, because I could hold a book in my hand and it's not even my book, and you could think it's my book, or
Right.
But I mean, the idea that you don't walk up to the mic with a whole bunch of papers, or that's maybe old school for many people. They come with their phones,
Right.
but the idea is that someone sees you with a book, and right away they think, "Oh, you must be real," which is kind of a funny thing. I mean, I think you have to feel that you're real and you're out there for a particular reason. And that's a whole other subject about, are you hoping for, economic gains, or, publicity, or famous, or what is behind your writing? For me, real quickly, I would just say it's more about social change and helping people, and me being able to express myself.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, do you have a personal preference in terms of how your books are produced? Like, do you prefer self-publishing or working with a small press, or do you desire to work with a larger publisher at some point?
I don't feel that the larger publishers are interested until they see that you're selling, or you have a name. I mean, a lot of people hate Amazon. A lot of good reasons in terms of it, but Amazon, in a sense, or their printing KDP,
Mhm.
really made it possible for so many indie artists. I mean, they bought up Creative Space and other places that were doing it to begin with, so they pretty much have that side. And your only other option is Ingram, and Ingram represents all the publishers in a way who wouldn't publish you.
Right.
So it's kind of a very funny, and they're only waking up now and not charging and not doing stuff. But I've tried to publish on both platforms, and personally, Amazon makes it very easy. And so this print on demand thing, I think, I mean, when some people talk about it, I mean, Benjamin Franklin, all these people self-published.
Right.
There wasn't publishers before. We kind of got into this thing that there were gatekeepers, and those
Right.
gatekeepers suddenly decided we were not, it'd be like your show. What gives you the right to have a podcast? I mean, you're not on, NPR. You didn't get picked by somebody I mean, maybe you'd want your radio show or your podcast on that. On
Right.
another level, you have control over your podcast, and you will
Mhm.
gain your own reputation because people like what you do. We're in
Right.
a different
Exactly.
world in that way because of that. So I don't look down on self-publishing as if it's something that's not worthy. It's only not worthy if you publish and then you sit home and not do anything,
Right,
because it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, if you're not on podcasts, if you're not on Zooms, if you're not going, I mean, COVID unfortunately did a big punch into, I was out a lot going to events. There were a lot of events happening.
right,
It was okay to travel to Austin to go to a festival. Now that's all kind of questionable. So it's changed how to be out there and market yourself or want you to get your word out. So I don't know that the publishing part, I mean, whatever makes it, I mean, if someone approaches you, that's great. I have a lot of horror stories from people who want to publish with me because they come to me because they were told, the publisher told them they can't use that cover. They want to change their poems. They want to edit certain things.
right,
That doesn't mean that your stuff doesn't need editing, but some people really felt like it was totally changing what they wanted to do. And they were told, we're not going to publish it unless you use our title or you use our front cover.
right,
So the people who came to me, I pick and choose. I don't just take anybody because I wouldn't have the time, and I'm not a vanity press, but I usually say to people that I want to publish, I want them to have the book that they want.
right,
And you're going to take that out into the world. And it's not up for me to decide, because some of the people I publish that I'll read through, some of the poems I like, some I don't. And some of them have large audiences. So I realize it's not me deciding whether you should have an audience.
right,
When you have your book out there, you'll see if you have an audience. That will be the wake-up call. If
right,
I mean, I sort of laugh sometimes. People, get up at readings and they kind of get the nice, thank you, thanks for sharing your work.
yeah,
And then they'll get really mad that somebody else gets up and was like, yeah, well, hey, wild. And they'll, how come you didn't do that for me? Well, that's a good question. You should have to ask it wasn't that, people were down on you. Something didn't hit, or you didn't present it very well. I think that's something else to really talk about here to writers is that, writing your stuff and having it and publishing it is one thing. And that's a lot of work and it's a lot of different steps. Now to be in front of an audience and present your work, it's just the nature of it. Many authors are not performers. They have not studied being on the stage. Many people are scared about being on the stage. They don't even know how to adjust the mic. And this isn't to put them down. It's, I was on a stage 1,000 shows when I was a juggler. So, I had a lot of opportunities to have everything go wrong and still try to figure out how to make it happen and not be freaked out about that. So
right,
when you have enough time of doing whatever you're doing, you approach it differently. So sometimes someone will say, wow, you got on the stage and the whole vibe changed in the room. It's like, well, yeah, the other people got up and kind of acted like, well, I don't know if you want to hear me. And I don't know if this is going to be any good. And it's like, well, why, then don't do it.
right, right.
I mean,
True.
obviously you're having a lot of doubt, I'm sorry. And, but you don't need to tell us, give us your best face, let's see it.
Right.
So
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. You said a lot that's on point because there's layers to this. Because when you're talking about methods of publishing, it's all about preference. What works best for you. Small press might work for me, but you might prefer self-publishing. So like that saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's no one size fits all when it comes to how an author chooses to publish their work. And then the other part to that is when it comes down to the individual, you have to examine yourself and ask yourself, why are you writing? Are you writing for attention, or are you writing for a sense of satisfaction or accomplishment? Like, you really have to examine why you write, because if you're writing just for the sake of applause, then that's a problem. If you're writing for superficial reasons, then you're going to get superficial responses. But if you're truly passionate about your art to the point where, I love what I write and it doesn't matter who likes it or doesn't like it, I'm going to speak my mind, and those that can get with it will gravitate towards it, then at the end of the day, that's all that matters, because it's all about overcoming your personal insecurities and, doing your best not to bring those insecurities to the stage. And granted, it needs to be said that, it's not about perfectionists. All poets are not required to be perfectionists. None of us are perfect when it comes to this art, but I'm a firm believer in transparency. I'm a firm believer in being myself and going to the stage and making up in my mind that when I step on the stage and present my work, I'm going as myself. I'm not trying to be like anyone else. I'm not trying to sound like anyone else. And every poet has to get to that place on their own where they're confident with their own work, where they only focus on those people that they're assigned to reach, because you may reach a certain segment of people that I might not reach. And in the same turn, there's a certain segment of people that I may reach that you may not reach. But at the end of the day, as poets, we all have somebody to reach with our work when we understand that all of our art is equally valid. We all have something to say, and there's always going to be at least one person that will pull something from what we have to say. And if we reach that one person, then we've made a difference.
Yeah, it's finding the key the thing is, it's hard to figure out to find your own voice, because we listen to a lot of things and we might like a certain thing. And then we find that, oh, we actually, have taken on a little bit of that. And they always say art is borrowing from this and that, but in the end, you have to make it your own, and try to really have it be there. And you're right in terms of, if I had certain times it's happened, and I'm getting more of that, where, the small press that I really like who they are, and I see the other authors and they want to publish something from me, that has happened. That happened when I got my awards from the Beat Poet, the international organization. They have their own publishing company, and they published a couple of my works. So that was, that's fine. And, I have the other, when I've gotten into magazines and various other stuff, I think it's important that I basically got tired of waiting around, and I knew I was going to be out, and self-publishing offered me to have the book when I was ready to have a book.
Right.
And I wanted to have the books so that when I went out there, it was working. And just doing that in itself helped me keep developing and understanding more about what do I want in a book, or what's going on. And so, I think that's an important thing to think about and learn. You were suddenly open up, and maybe the first poem shouldn't be about your dead dog. You know what I mean? People may be not drawn in after that. So,
Right.
And it's kind of a weird thing, because you go, wait a minute, all these poems are important to me. Well, the book is another art thing, I mean, what is on the back cover? What is on the cover? What is the title? What are people thinking they're getting into? I mean, it's interesting, like with your name, Poets with a Purpose.
Mhm.
Okay, that's not just, poets who love to read, or poets who love Kerouac, or poets who, whatever you would throw at the end of poets.
Right.
And so people either get a handle and understanding and say, oh, okay, well, what is their purpose? What are they here to do? And, are they fighting for freedom, or, whatever, what's going on?
Right.
So and then that gives you a group that you either join or you don't, or you would want to be, heard from, or glad to be, recognized by, and, then you try to go and try to do that. But usually it's because you're still going with your own voice. I mean, I'm not trying to find out what Poets and Purpose want and then write that.
Right.
I mean, unless I'm going for a contest and they say, the theme is world peace, or, whatever the world, the theme is, then, okay, great. I'm writing towards that because of that anthology, but I'm not changing how I write or what I'm doing. I'm giving my take on it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's talk about representation for a minute, because I'm quite sure that you've heard the word representation thrown around in circles in some way, shape, or form. Now, in terms of you as a person and your writing, how important is it to you that you make that you make sure that you're representing yourself in your totality through your writing? Given when you're talking about yourself, your life experiences, your ideas, your feelings, your emotions, everything that makes you who you are, how important is it to you that you're representing yourself in your work?
It's interesting, because, man, I don't know, do people call that branding now? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I don't know if I would use the word representation. What I feel is I have a certain thing that comes up, and sometimes the writing is just boom, there it is.
Mhm.
Sometimes I get a couple of lines I might put on my phone while I'm driving through the audio, just record. Somehow I thought it was a good idea. I
Mhm.
get home and I listen to it and I realize, oh, there's 3 or 4 ideas here actually. And I maybe write them down and just put them in a folder. And then one day I open it up and somehow those 3 lines give me something that I just suddenly run with. What I realized afterwards, I could want it to express something, and I'm thinking it's represented, but with all art, once it's out there, people have their own interpretations.
Right.
And you have to realize, what do you mean you thought that was about blah, blah, blah? Or no, I was writing about, no, I haven't, I'm not punching my girlfriend. I'm writing about people who have abuse. So again, do people think that's about me? Am I representing me, or am I writing because I'm tired of hearing about all the different people I know being abused?
Right.
And I want to be talking about it, and I want to say something about it, and say something about it as from a man.
Right.
Um, and so it becomes tricky when you say, is it representing me? I think it's more, am I being true to what I want to say? And then I have to let go, because I could be very discouraged if I heard someone say, oh, that's what that poem was about. It's like, well, that's what that poem was about for you.
Right.
And and that meant something to you, and that's great. And maybe some of the things you said is what I was thinking,
Mhm.
but you just pointed out some things I hadn't thought about. You took that word in a different direction than I was thinking about. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever done, when someone gives a theme, here's a prompt, and you have this one word of food or something, and the 10 poems that come in are like, wow, I wasn't thinking of food in that way, or I wasn't thinking of this.
Right. Right.
uh,
Everybody has their
you
different
know
perception
and
of it.
and so that in itself could be, what was I trying to represent? Well, I was representing, I guess you saw how food was important in my family, but I mean, it wasn't what other people thought about it. Really, they don't have food, I mean, so, or something.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. What poets are grabbing your attention, or what poets do inspire you?
Well, in the early days, I actually, because I was at the University of Buffalo and Robert Creeley was there, he brought a lot of the beats. So I saw Gary Snyder and William Burroughs, and I had a number of opportunities to see Ginsberg. And I went out to Naropa early on, and then didn't, because I wasn't what was happening, but there was a lot of writers there that I saw. Again, it was then people that albums and various lyrics, because I would read the lyrics at that time, and they were important to me. And now it's more living poets, though I'm getting every once in a while, if I read anything, a great thing we have out here, I'm out in the country, our library can access any book in Massachusetts through the library system, and it will be delivered to your library. So anytime a name comes up, like I was just asked to be at a poetry festival in Nigeria, and they were asking me what Nigerian poets did I know. And I realized I don't know any Nigerian poets.
Right.
So I looked up some Nigerian poets and authors, and I could get a couple of their books. So I got a couple of their books, and one of the authors the book had sold 1 million copies, and there was 8 million in print, and more things were happening with it, and they were really well known for what was going on. And I was starting to read it, and I thought, wow, there's just so many people I don't know about
Right.
in so many different countries, and people stating things. And when you go that way, you really realize a lot of people are talking about what's happening with them, the repressive governments, the violence or the cruelty of why are humans being cruel to each other. And it's kind of universal in that way, whether or not it's happening in Nigeria or Massachusetts, in Palestine, and or wherever it is. Uh,
Right.
and so I think hearing any of those voices of crying for and wanting something different to happen, and speaking to the truth of why aren't we making this a heaven on earth? We can.
Right.
All our resources are being used for war and destruction. So that's kind of what and not just stating it, but something that brings hope. I mean, it's hard to figure out how to talk about death and destruction and be funny, or end it with a sense that you have hope that it can change.
Right.
So I think I'm always inspired by writers who manage to really give you a couple gut punches, and at the same time, you see how they put it together and it clicks something, and you saw something else in it, or something else happened in that way. But there's too many names in terms of all the folks. I would say I think the most important thing for a writer, and you see it everywhere, is to read. Keep finding people. One great thing that helped me was realizing, I read this thing about, where did I get the perception that I had to finish a book? What if I just picked up a book and I opened it randomly, found a paragraph, was moved by it, and never read anything else in that book?
Right.
And that how important it is just to have books around, and again, see names. I pick up 5 or 6 books at the library at a time. Whether I read them or not, I may have that experience I just mentioned. I open up a page when I'm sitting down once in a while, and all those things influence me. And maybe some of those, all of a sudden, I'm in 5 or 6 pages. It grabbed me, and I keep going.
Right.
And then I look at it to try to see, why did it grab me? What grabbed? Why? They're all words. But this one I opened up and I didn't seem to go anywhere with it. I read it and there were words, but this one, man, I was eating up the words page after page.
Right. Yeah, so it's just a matter of, it just depends on the author that you stumble upon. There's going to be some that grab your attention, and some that don't. That's just usually how it goes. But it's a reality. Everything is not for everybody, but there is something for somebody. Well,
I tell people when I have, oh, sorry, didn't interrupt you.
No, wait, you were saying?
I tell people when I do my readings, I started this 5-minute time thing with sand timers, so that nobody could argue about anything. You could see the sand. When the sand was gone, you were gone. And it wasn't about power. It wasn't about anything. It was about, if you take another 2 minutes, then somebody on the list can't read because we're out of time.
Right.
And so we want everybody to have this opportunity. And one of the things I said, and one of the things it did, was once everybody realized everyone was going to get off in 5 minutes, people relaxed, because so many open mics and so many experiences, people were worried about, is somebody going to get this person off? How long do I have to listen to this?
Right.
If I don't like it. If you like it, you just want it to go on.
Yeah.
But what happened was, by setting up that environment and everybody realizing this is going to happen, and when the sand's gone, it's gone, people that they didn't like, they found lines, or they found moments where, like, oh, that was an interesting way, or interesting might be the right way. That was a great way of putting that together, that
Right.
thought. I don't like the rest of it, or I don't relate to it, but that imagery of, the cat falling out of the tree or something was well done, And so I think it's partly of that, of, like I say, many times, like I said, I'll read something. This is a fantastic author. Everyone loves them. I'll get the book and realize, I tried 3 or 4 times and I couldn't do it. I mean, one example from the Beats, I got on the road because, Kerouac died in 1969 when I was there, around that time period, for first going into college. So it was a big deal putting his name out there. I tried to read on the road and I didn't get it. And I couldn't, nothing happened. I didn't read it. It just put it down. I don't know what it was. Maybe a couple of years later, maybe not, 2, 3, I was on the road hitchhiking, got in the back of a car, and it was in the car. And for some reason, when I picked it up then, boom, I just ripped through that in the 8 hours I was in the car.
Wow.
And I laughed and thought, so I wasn't ready for it, or I didn't quite get what it was that I was reading. Somehow being in what I was doing gave it context or something, you know what I mean? And so I think it's just us trusting that too, that, I mean, it's like people don't trust when they go to a museum and they look at, what some people call abstract paintings. And I could take a bucket and throw paint on the wall. It's like, well, yeah, you could. Would it look like that? I don't know. It's okay to say you don't like it, or you might see something you really like about it, or it does have an emotion that you think of,
Right.
And so I think that's the same thing with writers. I don't put them down because I don't get into it. I just realize for some reason it's not happening. And it's happened with a number of writers when I first tried to read them and I didn't really quite get it. Years later, I would try again and I'd realize, oh, there was something else new where I had changed.
Right.
I had a different perspective now. And I could certainly, suddenly the book made sense to me,
Right. And that's how it usually goes sometimes, sometimes, we don't necessarily um certain work that we read doesn't grab our attention right away. Sometimes you have to put it down and then go back to it. And when you go back to it, you get a greater understanding of it because it's in a different context. Maybe you needed some time to pass, or maybe it was another situation that opened your eyes to the certain subject matter that was in the poetry of that particular moment. So, it doesn't hurt, you know, to put something down for the moment. It doesn't mean that the poetry is bad. It just may mean that you just need more time to review it and rehearse it in your mind in order to get that clarity and understanding. And then with that, I think that provides the perfect segue to our next portion of this episode, because now it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for Paul to take the mic. Now, at this time, Paul, you are welcome to do up to 5 poems of your choice to give our audience an idea of who you are and your work. So at this time, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's see here. I guess I'll read this first one that I did it's called Justice. It was a theme. I read it just recently, but it's a new one, and there's a big question about this going on all over the world, I guess. So here it is, Justice. There is an old saying, there is no justice, there is only adjustment. Justice was made up to have a mommy and daddy to step in and make things right, fair. Why was your house blown away by a hurricane? Why was your house burned down by lightning? Everything you owned is floating down the river. Are the gods angry and mad at you? There is no justice, there's only adjustment. What about Johnny torturing Billy and raping Susie? That's why we make laws, so many laws that hardly stop anyone, unless the community enforces them. Is that what we call justice? There is an old photo with a question under it. Is this the first prison? And what you see is a man lying down with a tree on top of him. The tribe had put the tree on him. They sat off to the side discussing what to do. He had stolen from everyone. He had been told over and over and over and over again to stop. He wouldn't stop. He was now stopped with a tree on him. Should they leave him there for the ants, or believe him now that he said he would stop? There were no lawyers or money or guns involved. The community had decided. Some call this justice. The game has been rigged for those with wealth and power. That's where the money and the lawyers come in, and they have the guns behind them, deciding how the laws will work for them. Justice is declared for them, while the victims realize that justice is just a word. We are made to believe over and over again, follow the laws and you won't get into trouble. What happens when everything is illegal? There ain't many choices. If you don't have the money, the lawyers, or the guns, you'll be calling out, where is the justice? We demand justice. Many have said in the past, the gods are deaf. Zeus and the gang are too busy fighting among themselves, and Jesus is too busy telling his followers they have it all wrong. Buddha is telling us it will all pass and to stay in the moment. But it's not fair. Nobody ever said it was fair. Oh, but wait, yes, they did. But Johnny learned it wasn't fair. And if you are on the wrong color, or if you're the lower class, then you just keep hearing the screams for justice getting louder. If all the gods are deaf, if all the judges are bought off, if all the law enforcement is responsible for the rapings and the beatings and the killings, then where is the justice? I just want to say I'm tired of adjusting. I don't like the choices. I'm tired of playing the game where there are no winners for those who seek justice. I did mention I am tired about adjusting, didn't I? Some say love is the answer. Money is the god that funds the wars and destruction. I will love the day when there is accountability, for I am tired of adjusting. Oh, by the way, here comes the rain, here comes the lightning, and here comes the wind. And I don't know who let Johnny loose again. let's see here. Maybe I'll do this one here. This is called Brothers and Sisters. I'm in a large room. I'll start that again. Move this over. I am in a large room with strangers. Each person at the mic says, "Hello, brothers and sisters. Are we the siblings of the Mother Revolution? We meet on the street. We don't know each other. Is it obvious we are not fitting in? Hello, brothers and sisters." Our eyes catch each other as we watch the oppression continue and intensify. Hello, brothers and sisters. In a cheering bar where the crowd is in a frenzy as the screens call for war, we catch each other's eyes. Hello, brothers and sisters. We are in the halls of plutocracy. We are told there is no money to help. We feel cold around the flames of the money burning. We are told it's our fault. Brothers and sisters. We watch the endless scenes of the beatings and killings by those in uniforms. We learn how to hide, know which side we don't want to be on. Hello, brothers and sisters. I see you walking along the road. I offer a ride. I share a sandwich. I give you my water for the road. Hello, brothers and sisters. And when everything is contraband, I see you shake as you hand over your bag. I ran screaming in the other direction, hoping to create a distraction. Did you get away? Hello, brothers and sisters. The news shows your picture. I know I have to do more than run in the other direction screaming. There is no distraction. Hello, brothers and sisters. We're here today to renew our commitment. Mother is calling us to be kind, to not believe the lies. Open your eyes. To all the brothers and sisters who have been killed. Hello, brothers and sisters. The drumming has already started. Yes, there is dancing in the streets. We embrace the love and hold on tight. We share what we know. We share what we have learned. We commit to the future generations. Hello, brothers and sisters. Let's see here. I'll try to pull one from my book here. Oh, I'll do this one. This is a funny one. I went to a bunch of funerals, and sometimes I felt like things didn't get said. And then I talked to a couple of people, and this is what came out of this one. Parting words at the funeral. People stepped up and said, "He was a drunken slob. He beat his wife, abandoned his kids. He made my life hell. I'm glad he's dead. He was my older brother. He beat the crap out of me. He dominated my life, taking anything he wanted. I thought of killing him myself several times. I'm glad he's dead. Everyone at the church thought he was a saint. He played the organ every Sunday. When he came home from church, he beat me and my sister. I'm tired of the lies. I'm glad he's dead. He lied, he stole, he cheated, he was tormented. He was never the same after the war. He wanted it all just to be over. May he rest in peace. I'm glad he's dead. She said she never wanted children. We stopped her from doing everything she wanted to do. She beat us, she pushed us away, told us how much she hated us. We all wanted to be free of her. I'm glad she's dead. He was an older brother. Everyone said I was lucky to have an older brother. After years of abuse, being raped by him, I am really glad he's dead. Thank you all for coming here today. We are sorry to not have more time to hear from all of you. If you would tell the people towards the back, we are out of the allotted time to show our respect for the dead. Besides, the food's getting cold and people want the bar to open up. If I may speak for all of you in the closing, we all share feelings of relief and joy. We're all really, really glad they are dead. We may all find a way to rest in peace. It was a short one, running out of time. Lunch A bartender who had two elderly parents helped seniors raise money by selling their raffle tickets to the bar patrons. He waited until they had at least 2 drinks. Then he would give his pitch. He sold a lot of raffles, raising the money the seniors needed to have lunch. And time for one more? Is that the,
Yes, you got time for one more.
all right, I'll do this one. This is called Billy Deserved It. When the camera focuses in, the audience sees a poet at the microphone saying, the next poem is about bullying. A guy yells from the audience, you wimp. The poet recognizes the voice, says, is that you, Billy? And Billy yells back, yeah, I should have drowned you in the toilet in Dead End High School when I had the chance. The poet says, step into the light so I can see if it's really you. Billy steps out into the light. The poet says, yeah, it's you. You still have that same smirk, and pulls out a gun and shoots Billy several times. A waitress runs up, what's going on here? And looks down at the body. The poet says, I shot Billy. She said, is that Billy from Dead End High School? The poet says, yeah. The waitress grabs the gun and she shoots Billy several times. The owner comes over and sees the waitress with the gun and takes it away. What is going on? She said, I shot Billy. The owner said, that's Billy from Dead End High School? Everyone nods. He shoots Billy several times. The police arrive. They ask who the victim was. On finding out, they shoot Billy several times. His body was then removed. No one was arrested. The poet didn't feel the need to recite the poem on bullying anymore. Instead, he decided to recite how lonely they were. When the waitress suddenly starts screaming, I loved you, you rejected my love, you want to be lonely. The poet decided to read a different poem called Dealing with Your Shit in Public. Thanks very much.
Wow, wow, wow. Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, those were poetry selections by Paul Richmond. Paul, I enjoyed those poems, man. Very powerful, unique pieces. The imagery is just wild. I mean, you really got a unique spin on your work that caught my attention from start to finish. I appreciate you sharing your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of this episode. So if there's anyone in our audience tonight with a question or comment for Paul, you can unmute yourself at this time and share your question or comment. Well, I'll actually start it off. If you
The crowd went wild.
If you could collaborate with any poet, living or deceased, who would it be and why?
Living or deceased collaborate. Well, there's some recent poets who are part of the Beat organization who work with musicians, and I do that a lot. And I like to do that, and it kind of changes the poetry, the pieces for sure. And so that part seems good. I'm not sure, it's interesting I don't think about, like I would write a line, you would write a line. People do a lot of those kinds of things. Some of that interests me, but it's more about that I would, and I do that in my festivals. It's more that you would be performing and I'd be performing, and that would be the collaboration, and we'd be inspiring each other. And so it's just to create events in which I would try to bring together people that I felt like I got really inspired by. And that in itself would be the collaboration. And then it's the talking afterwards, and the talking and just being together that is an important aspect of sharing. I mean, things like this are how we would influence each other. When I heard your poems, when you read at the festival, and other people's stuff, I hadn't had a chance to hear your stuff. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, here's this person and what he's doing, he's got this whole organ, it's always it's a good thing to kind of keep reaching out and meeting new folks. So in that way, I'm always looking for that. You could say that's how I would want to collaborate.
Excellent, excellent. And what would you, taking all of your work into consideration, what would you hope to accomplish with your work?
I would hope that a couple of things that, and a realistic way that someone read it and felt encouraged to be able to write themselves, and to speak their truth, or that they heard that, oh, okay, wow, you got that desperate too, or that really made you think about, why am I believing in this or that? And so that, it takes away the loneliness or makes some connection. On the bigger, broader fantasy world, it's the big poets from, Chile or other places that really helped galvanize movements to try to get social justice and change their country to be more humane. So it's a whole range there that I just try to start out little of that, that you found something in it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And we have this relationship now, and we'll go back and forth, and hopefully it gets out there more of other ways and other people being affected. And so, you try to go with what you have.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Before we close out, if no one else in our audience has any questions, Paul, do you have any other projects or events that you would like to announce to our audience before we close?
Well, if people are seeing this, I don't know if they're in the area. I'm doing an all-day festival on Sunday, which is going to be 5 hours of poets, 8 poets an hour, with exhibit tables and buying books and all kinds of things, at a place where people can eat and spend the whole day. I do it now. I think people, if they check out my YouTube channel, and I have a pay-per-view channel, you'll see the musicians that I've worked with. Avery Sharp, a bass, jazz bass player, pretty well known. Lots of different people who, we really did this thing of doing it now. They didn't know what I was going to read. I didn't know what they were going to play, and we created something. And so, that kind of really, you might find that interesting to think about or see.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks for creating these kinds of events and podcasts to honor other writers. And I was glad to be part of one of them.
Excellent. Excellent. I appreciated your time and your talents. And as we close out, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do one more thing, and that is just to say thank you. Paul, thank you again for your time. Truly enjoyed your poetry. Very inspirational, very thought-provoking, very imaginative. Truly enjoyed your presence and your work, and I wish you all the best with your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Coming up next on episode 9 is another awesome poet in their own right, Mr. Tim Tomlinson. That episode will be taking place on Tuesday, December 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information about Poets with Purpose and the P.W.P sessions, you can call me at 646-372-6230 or email me at poetswithpurpose@gmail.com. All of my flyers and logos were done by the excellent team of Eclipse Graphics. You can find them on Instagram at @Eclipse Graphics NY. And for those of you wishing to make a donation, you can do so through PayPal, Tap Media Man, $Anointed Pen, or through Zelle, utilizing my phone number. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for episode number 8. This episode will be uploaded to the Poets with Purpose YouTube channel within the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for that, so you can be able to share that on your social media channels or websites or other avenues of connections. Paul, thank you so much. Thank you again to my audience. Have a good night and God bless. Thank you.
Take care.